Steel City. Is everybody ready to go? It's proclaimed the greatest radio show.
Welcome, fans, to The Spread. This is your boy, Big Easy, in the studio with fantasy guru J Dash.
Believe it.
What's this? Week 7?
Week 7.
Week 7. Fantasy situational starters, sleepers, deep sleepers. Other than that 1 week we missed that you reminded me of, we do it weekly.
Well, I actually think we did get it in the fantasy segment in that week.
Oh, we did?
Yeah, we didn't get the Lions segment, and we skipped a Steelers segment.
That's when viewership fell off, huh?
A little bit, yeah. We'll get back up, though. But let's start off with the situational starters. So far this season for non-quarterbacks, we're averaging 16.25 points per player. And that is 16 different players we've been through so far. Plus, we had 2 quarterbacks. They averaged 21.5 for us. So not bad out of the situational starters. Last week wasn't too bad. Doug Baldwin kind of blew it for us. He had 7 points. Other than that, everybody we picked did pretty well. So who are you going with for your situational starter this week?
All right, for my situational starter, I'm going to have to go with James White for New England. We're in trouble. We're in trouble in this game.
Meaning we? You mean Pittsburgh?
Yeah, I'm not me and you, the Pittsburgh Steelers. I mean, being at home helps, but Tom Brady's on a roll.
Almost 800-yard passing, 800 yards in 2 games.
They've had success at Heinz Field. I mean, they have success
just
everywhere.
Versus Pittsburgh as a whole.
I think, what's his name? LeGarrette Blount, he's banged up, or is he going to go? Or?
Oh, I think he should be playing in this game. And, he should have a solid game looking at what Jay Ajayi did in the run game last week against the Steelers, over 200 yards rushing. But for the entire season as a whole, the Steelers haven't done that great of a job against the running backs that are used in the passing game, and that's James White. He had 2 receiving TDs last week. Now, if you remember, Giovanni Bernard had 100 yards receiving against the Steelers. And Darren Sproles, your boy, did as well.
Yep.
So James White, I think he can have a big week here. And really, after this past week against Miami, Pittsburgh has given up the 5th most fantasy points now to running backs on the season.
That's right. I mean, when you give up 220 in one game, that's going to hurt your stats.
Believe it. I'm going to go with Spencer Ware, the Kansas City Chiefs running back, going up against New Orleans. New Orleans has led up the most fantasy points to running backs. Their defense is bad. I mean, they've been playing high-scoring games this season. And Spencer Ware, last week, everybody was down on him, saying Jamal Charles was going to take over. That was at Oakland. Both Charles and Spencer Ware had good games. Ware actually blew up, and he was one of our deep sleepers. Now I think people understand he's still a viable option in fantasy.
Right.
So we're going to take him as a situational starter this week.
That's right.
The Saints have actually allowed 11 rushing touchdowns this season. That is the most in the NFL. And look what Spencer Ware did last week versus the Oakland Raiders. 131 yards and a touchdown on 24 carries. Charles, he got more of the carries in the red zone. He was more of the goal line back. But he should get more playing time as the season goes along and probably will take over as the lead back eventually. But again, just like last week, I think both running backs can get it done versus this New Orleans defense.
Dig it.
And one other running back, Tampa Bay running back, Jacquizz Rodgers, going up against the San Francisco Giants in San Francisco. They led up the 6th most fantasy points to running back so far this season. Doug Martin's injured. He's not expected back yet. Charles Sims, actually, I believe he went on the IR. I know he's injured and he's not going to be playing. Last week, Jacquizz Rodgers is the main back, 30 carries, 101 yards at Carolina. Now, Carolina isn't as good as everyone thought they were going to be, but it's still a pretty solid defense. Well, that actually wasn't last week. They had a bye last week, so that was their last game, I should say. But he also had 5 receptions in that game for 28 yards. He's going to be the starting running back this week, and I think he can get it done versus San Francisco's defense, who's a little bit better against the pass than they are the run. So Rodgers should have a shot to have a big game here. All right, let's move on to sleepers.
I'll tell you what. I'm going to give this dude a shot, and I'll call him a sleeper. T.J. Yeldon versus the Raiders. He's on my fantasy team. I played him earlier in the season when Ivory was out. He performed.
Yeah.
And, then Ivory came back, and his points dropped down a little bit. But, You know what? Oakland's defense got torched last week, so.
Yeah, we were just mentioning it.
Right.
They led up the 8th most fantasy points to running backs. Like I said, Ware and Charles both did it big against Oakland. I think Ivory and TJ Yeldon can have good games. Not what Charles and Ware did, but they can have solid games. Ivory's more of the goal line back, so he may be able to get into the end zone. Yeldon's supposed to take over as the lead back. In fact, he was supposed to last week, but he ended up being outtouched by Ivory. I still think Yeldon's going to be the lead back moving forward. And I expect him to have more carries than Ivory in this game. And like you said, when Ivory was down, he wasn't that bad in fantasy, but he's been a little inconsistent. He's had double digits in fantasy 3 times out of 5 games so far this season.
I know 2 of them were the first 2. I know that.
Yeah, so...
I'm giving him a shot because my running backs are busted, man. Eddie Lacy's out. Doug Martin, obviously, he's been out.
Yeah.
I think Theo Riddick's, we don't know what's going on with him.
Hopefully he plays.
I mean, I'm busted at RB. I got in Yeldon and T. Coleman.
I like both of those plays this week, man. So you should be okay at least for this week. Moving forward, it might be a little bit scary with Yeldon when the matchup gets a little bit harder.
Right.
I think Jacquizz Rodgers is still out there, though, man, so you may want to take a look at him.
Right.
I'm going to go with a quarterback. Alex Smith for the Kansas City Chiefs. Like I mentioned, Spencer Ware going up against New Orleans should have a big game. And Alex Smith, I thought he could have a solid game last week at Oakland. It was considered a good matchup for him, but the weather was really bad. And like I said, the running game was doing so well, they really didn't need Alex Smith to do much. He had 224 yards and no touchdowns. But if you look, he has 2 TDs and a pick in 3 road games, so he's not playing that well on the road. In fact, both of those TDs and the pick came in Week 4 against Pittsburgh, which was his only good road game so far this season. But in 2 home games, he has 3 TDs and 1 pick, and he also has his only 300-yard game at home as well. And in those 2 games, 81 pass attempts combined, so he's thrown a lot at home. New Orleans, like I mentioned, they've been playing high-scoring games, 60, 70 points per game. And
total.
Yeah, between the 2 teams, correct. And I think that can continue this week. So I think Alex Smith is going to have to pass because if New Orleans is scoring, I mean, they can't just do what they did last week and run the ball left and right like they did against Oakland. Oakland only put up 10 points. If New Orleans goes out there and puts up 30 points, Alex Smith is going to have to throw the ball all over the place. And I think he can crush this New Orleans defense, to tell you the truth.
Now, I mentioned my running backs, Eddie Lacy. I was looking into it. There's and James Starks is out too. So
yeah, they picked up Nile Davis. But Ty Montgomery, wide receiver, is supposed to play running back.
That's what I hear. Now, what will we consider Ty Montgomery? Comatose?
No, you got to pick this guy up, and when he has a solid matchup, definitely play him. He's a definite flex option right now. I mean, he's going to be playing receiver too.
Is Nile Davis comatose then?
Yeah, Nile Davis is more of the comatose.
All right, that's what I wanted to clear up because I have there's other fans that want some fantasy info, and one of them was about Ty Montgomery for sure.
Yeah, pick him up for sure.
Okay.
I was going to. He's already picked up in our league. I wanted to pick up Cameron Meredith. Jim picked him up, so I really haven't been staying up on the waivers.
You're not up at 3 a.m. waiting to getting that click in.
Well, I mean, you could put the waiver claim in, but I really don't worry about it. I like my team. They're deep, whatever. One other guy, tight end. I made a mistake in saying take this guy over Kobe Fleener last week for your buddy.
Yeah.
But he still did have 10 targets last week, so he was the top option for Joe Flacco out there. It just happened to turn out that it wasn't a big game. But he's had 8 or more targets in 4 of his last 5 games.
Well, he got through to in the end zone, remember? We've seen that.
Yeah,
Turned
overthrown.
it on just in time,
correct.
Yeah.
Now, this week going up against the New York Jets in New York, they led up the 7th most fantasy points to tight end so far this season. Steve Smith's still banged up. He looks very questionable at this point. Mike Wallace is really the only receiver out there that's a big threat, and they also have Kamar Aiken out there, who's another option. He didn't see many targets last week. So it's Mike Wallace and Pitta, and I think Pitta is going to remain one of Flacco's main targets. If Flacco plays, Flacco's health is a concern as well. But even if he wouldn't play, I mean, that would be even better for Pitta, I think. I can't even tell you who the backup is right now. I can't think of it.
It doesn't matter.
But yeah, usually backups look to their tight end more often if they can't get the ball downfield. So Dennis Pitt is a guy I'm playing no matter who's in a quarterback for Baltimore this weekend. And I expect him to see at least 8 targets again. All right, one more set of guys here. Deep sleepers.
I had a little gleam in my eye when I seen this guy's name, but then it quickly wore off. Pierre Garçon at Detroit.
Oh, real quick, let me say, our sleepers last week did blow it up. They had 24 points, 35 points, and 23 points. Golden Tate was the one with 35. We're averaging 16.53 points per sleeper. Deep sleepers were averaging 15.12 now. We had a big week with them as well. Spencer Ware was the guy we picked. Robert Woods had a big week for us. And Brock Osweiler did a big as well. So deep sleeper, go ahead. Move on, man. Sorry.
No, same. Just going to go with a wide receiver. I thought about him. Well, they were both sitting there, Deshaun Jackson and Pierre Garçon. I'm thinking, I had an image of Deshaun Jackson pulling up lane with a hamstring.
Well, he's actually not been playing very well recently. He dropped a touchdown pass last week as well. He's just not getting it done.
So they looked enticing, but then I passed on both of them. I think I went in and I forget who I put in. No, this is my daily. I was going to pop him in my daily lineup. But Pierre Garçon, 18 targets over the last 2 weeks, man. That's huge.
Yeah, and that was with Jordan Reed out. It looks like Jordan Reed could miss this week again. But even if not, I think that hurts Crowder more than Garçon. Yeah, at Detroit. Detroit's been putting up a ton of points. So Washington should be passing more than they have the past few weeks at least because they had a pretty soft schedule. I think they're on a 4-game winning streak right now.
Right.
And they're 4-2 on the season, I would have to believe. But Pierre Garçon, like you said, all those targets, 11 of those came last week. He's being targeted a ton. Detroit's going to be scoring points. Their secondary isn't that great in terms of fantasy, at least. Pierre Garçon, I believe, is going to have a big week. I mean, he's been solid so far this season. He has double-digit fantasy points in PPR in 4 or 6 games.
The only thing that's going to hurt him, I believe, is if Washington's defense has a good game because, I don't know, they've been known to get at it. And they could, if they have their way on the line and the offense for Detroit struggles, and it's more like a 17-10 or something like 21-13 kind of game like that, then I don't think he's going to be getting the numbers, and that's obviously why he's our deep sleeper.
Believe it. Now, if this game was in Washington, I would probably not even make him a deep sleeper. But seeing it's in Detroit, Matt Stafford's having a great season so far. Detroit's putting up points, so at home they've been even a little bit better. So I think they're going to keep putting up points at home. And Garçon's going to see, again, a high amount of targets like he has the past few weeks. I'm going to go with Charles Clay from the Buffalo Bills going up against the Miami Dolphins in Miami. They're about middle of the league against fantasy tight ends. But here's why I'm taking them. Sammy Watkins, we seen, went down a few weeks ago. Robert Woods stepped in and has been playing pretty well. Did pretty well for us last week as a deep sleeper. He's actually injured right now. So they have, I think his first name's Marquise Goodwin, a receiver out there, and Charles Clay should be one of the top targets this week. And he's actually had double digits in fantasy and PPR over the past 2 weeks, had 5 receptions each of the past 3 weeks. Like I said, with everybody injured out there, Charles Clay should see more and more targets because there's really nobody else out there. So if you're looking for a deep sleeper tight end this week, I think Charles Clay is going to step in and get you double-digit fantasy points.
I like it.
And the last guy, Adam Humphries, Tampa Bay wide receiver, going into San Francisco. San Francisco, like I mentioned before, they're actually pretty good against fantasy wide receivers. They let up the 12th fewest points, but he's going to be playing in the slot. Vincent Jackson is now out for the season, it looks like. So Adam Humphries is going to step into the slot. Mike Evans, really the only guy out there that you can rely on in the passing game, obviously. Cameron Brate is a okay tight end, a guy you can play in certain situations. But you look at Adam Humphries, man, in weeks 2 and 3 combined, he had 15 receptions for 167 yards. However, in weeks 3 and 4, he only had 2 catches for 15 yards. So he kind of fell off a little bit. But you look, those games were versus Denver and at Carolina, so tough matchups. They're coming off a bye now in week 6, so I think they're going to be wanting to get him back involved in this offensive game. And if you actually look, those two big games I was talking about in weeks 2 and 3, they were against NFC West teams, at Arizona and versus LA. Like I said, at San Francisco this week. So I think he's going to keep getting it done versus the NFC West. What do you think, man? As good as last week? No chance. It's hard.
Well, Daly's hard picking these Daly guys.
Yeah, we should put these guys in, man. I'm telling you. There's a lot of running backs I picked this week, though. You can't pick them all, obviously.
Right. I like them. Alex Smith, that's questionable, but that's it. I mean, you like to throw quarterbacks in there sometimes.
Yeah, at least one a week in some situation.
So we'll see. Another question posed from a fan. Sterling Shepard or Doug Baldwin this week?
Well, like I was saying before, you said that is at Arizona, so that's a road game for Doug Baldwin. We mentioned last week he plays a lot better at home. Now, he didn't get it done at home this past week, but I think he only has 70 yards receiving on the road this season. So I'm staying away from Doug Baldwin. Sterling Shepard got a pretty good matchup going up against LA. Not that their defense is terrible or anything, but they've been letting up some points against fantasy wide receivers. I know Sterling Shepard has kind of fallen off since the first 3 weeks of the season, but he's young and he's going to be a little inconsistent as the season goes along. I think he's going to be able to get it done versus LA, though, because we've seen what Odell Beckham did last week. LA wants to stop that from happening again.
Would Antonio Brown be considered comatose this week?
No, he's a must start.
He's
Antonio
a must
Brown,
start.
you have to start Antonio Brown. I mean, if the Steelers want to stay in that game, they're going to have to find ways to get Le'Veon the ball and Antonio Brown the ball. So if it's PPR, he's a must start. Even if it's a standard league, I mean, he's the top receiver. You got to keep playing him. It sucks, but go with him.
That's it then. Fantasy fans, you want to hit us up on Twitter, you can do that at bet_the_spread. Go to that Facebook page, facebook.com/betthespread. Hit Jim personally up about fantasy questions. Twitter, that's right, at betjimthewin. And that's going to do it for us here. Week 7, fantasy popping.
Ball.